Once again, my mind is blown. What's happening, everyone? It's Ty the TV Guy here, back with another Stranger Things 5 video update. And I have just completed Volume 2 of Stranger Things 5, so episodes 5, 6, and 7, of course, that released just this past night on Christmas night. And after a long day of Christmas festivities, I got home and was able to watch through all these episodes. I have so much to talk about. Before I get deep into things, make sure to like this video, comment what you thought of things below as long as you've already seen it, and subscribe to the channel for more content as we wrap up this incredible series here. I also want to note I'm going to be posting this as soon as I possibly can, so this is a big spoiler warning. If you have not seen Stranger Things 5 Volume 2, I would not continue with this video, at least not yet. Maybe bookmark it and come back. But for now, I would bypass it because I'm going to be talking all things Volume 2. But now that the spoiler warning and the little intro's out of the way, I can open up to you guys like a Demogorgon's mouth, all the way open. And once again, I am just dazzled by Volume 2, at least on first watch. I felt the same way after Volume 1. I feel like I kind of lose some of my critical sense when I'm watching for the first time because I'm just so enamored that I have new Stranger Things. Like, especially with this show, I feel like I'm that way. And so I really loved and enjoyed this on first watch. Once again, maybe I'll have more criticisms as I rewatch over the next week before the finale episode, but I just want to come at this from an honest perspective that I acknowledge I was probably enamored and maybe looking past some of its flaws, but I did at the same time really just love most of what went on here in this 3-episode stretch. There were so many impressive moments and feats for our characters. I thought the interpersonal moments and dialogue was much improved from Volume 1, and there were just so many awesome character moments between some of my favorites that maybe have been lacking, for a little while now. And so I'm going to get into the specifics of some of these here. And I'll start out with a couple of my favorite moments from these episodes, So we'll start with episode 5, Shock Jock, of course. And forgive me if I forget exactly what happens in each episode. I obviously remember the grander, plot and main details of each episode, but I may forget when a certain detail occurs in the timeline. So if I go a little out of order here, I apologize. But with the Shock Jock, in terms of great moments, I first of all just love where we pick up and, the fact that Will is being greeted by Mike and Joyce, and it's like, wow, this was a tremendous display. We get Joyce with her plan back at the WSQK radio station where she's saying that Will can tap back into the hive mind if they get him close enough and kill Vecna once and for all. And everyone's just still so shocked about the revelation of Will's powers, or at least that he was able to tap into Vecna's. And then obviously another super exciting moment came in Shock Jock this episode, again revolving around Will's powers and ability to tap into that hive mind. They had a creative plan to tap into it via the Sinclairs, actually. Erica wanted to go get Mr. Clark, and her plan more so served finding Dustin and the Hawkins crew that was in the Upside Down, whereas Lucas's was more relevant to what actually happened in this episode, where they kind of electroshock a Demogorgon slightly back to life, so that it gets that blood coursing through its veins again. It is somewhat rehabilitated, and the hive mind is now alive and active near Will, so that he can potentially tap into that hive mind and corrupt Vecna, which he's able to do with perfect timing as Vecna is about to kill Max because of how much of a thorn she's been in his side recently, especially with ruining his plan, trying to help Holly escape. That conflicts directly with what he's trying to do in capturing all these children. And so that scene was just amazing. That's where we got the run moment from Will that I was waiting for so long. He's telling Max to run all of this time. I thought it was going to be he was being possessed by Vecna and telling the, friends around him to run away from him before he, lashes out at them or whatever. But he was, as Vecna, telling Max to run because soon Vecna's going to be back in his body and try to kill you. Oh my gosh, that was so epic. That was unbelievable. I could not believe that. I was jumping off the couch, out of my seat, and I thought that scene was just masterful. One of my favorites in the history of the show. To me, it competes and rivals the scene where Will is actually, his powers are revealed just in the episode before in Sorcerer. I think it rivals it, personally. Now, that's on first watch, I know, but I thought that was absolutely crazy, and I loved that it tied in more so to Vecna, than just Will killing the Demogorgons. But to me, both may end after everything is said and done as top 10 moments in the show, because I was just shocked even more so at how that was carried out. So absolutely spectacular there. Moving on to episode 6, of course, the escape from Camazotz, focusing in more so on Max and Holly's escape, even though a lot of that did occur throughout episode 5, even though they were kind of stopped momentarily by Vecna. Will saved the day. And in episode 6, Holly is steadfast in her pursuit of a way out and really helps Max get to the point where she ultimately ends up in Lucas's arms as we see her open her eyes for the first time in a year and a half at the beginning of episode 7. And so that was a super heartfelt moment. I just love Max and Lucas. Their connection is so awesome. And, the love that this show is driven by is just truly moving in some of these moments. And that one was no exception. I absolutely loved what Max said when she woke up. Like, all I needed was you to believe and the hope of finding you again, basically, to bring me back to life. And of course, we all know there was a lot of help from Holly, as she acknowledged to Holly herself. In Escape from Camazotz at the very end there, I was also pretty moved, surprisingly to me, by the Max and Holly conversation. I thought it was great that Max, didn't just find her way out and then say, all right, see ya, Holly. She was still concerned for Holly, and she's just a great person, just like all these characters seem to be, have such an awesome heart. And she, despite not having a super close connection with Holly before the recent events, still really cares for her and wants her to make it out alive, and knows she deserves to, and tries to guide her that way and give her the confidence, because she knows she can't necessarily save her, but she can give her some tools to maybe do so. And so I thought that was great for Max, and wow, I do think that bringing Max back has paid off a lot more so now. We've certainly gotten a lot of good and interesting moments with her, though, and has helped push the plot forward in terms of the lore of the Upside Down and things Vecna is scared of and what have you. So those are a few of my favorite moments. Also, I think that Escape from Camazotz had so many great emotional scenes. I mean, I was tearing up probably like 4 times, with when Dustin finally comes clean that he's just so scared to lose Steve, and Steve needs to stop being selfish, putting his life on the line and not thinking about how, reckless he's being in some of his actions to save the day, when he's really just doing what he accused Eddie of doing, trying too much to be the hero. And Dustin has seen this movie before, and he's like, I can't lose you. I almost cried with that. The Nancy and Jonathan stuff I thought was really, really good. Some of my favorite dialogue of season 5, to be honest with you. Once again, at least on first watch, I thought it was really good and moving. I knew they weren't going to die there, but I liked that they set it up in a way where they kind of had to spill their guts because, death appeared to be imminent for a while. So I thought that was really cool. I also liked a really good Joyce and Hopper conversation about parenting, and how Hopper said, the thing about parenting is, you're going to look back on it or something and you're going to realize you were always wrong. And yeah, I just love a lot of the grace that the characters in this show for each other, especially this season. Will and Joyce seem to have that understanding more so with each other now, that it's not your fault. These are extraordinary circumstances, and you've done everything you can to help your friends, to help yourself and your family. And Hopper and Joyce have that dynamic. Everybody just seems so understanding, and I just love these characters, and I'm going to be devastated if and when one of them or multiple of them die in this final battle that's been set up in the last episode. To get into talking about that here, and once again, I know my thoughts are kind of sporadic. That's the nature of my first reaction here. To get into the final battle and, how I think this has shaped up, of course, the primary indication so far is that 11 is in the most danger. Kali has been brought back, which I'll dive into a little more here in a second, but talking about 11 first. Kali's been brought back, and, seems like a lot of her main purpose has been letting 11 know that this may not stop just because Vecna dies. There may still be a chance that, if we live on, if his blood lives on through others even, and there could be more out there, but we know of us, then this thing still might not be over. And so obviously it's honestly kind of more than hinting. It's just heavily indicating that at this point it appears 11 would need to die for the rest of the world to live on and prosper, essentially. And so 11's gonna have to make this decision of whether she tries to save herself or she does make this sacrifice play, as 8 is suggesting would be appropriate. So obviously, like I said, it's kind of even more than a hint. It's just like telling us that 11 has this choice to make. Will she sacrifice herself? Will she try to come back and play the long game here and, survive without the military seeing her the rest of her life? She'd have to kind of hide out like she always had. Is it going to be worth it? I don't know. There's a lot of things to consider there. But it's definitely interesting. It kind of is following a path that I expected it to, in terms of like 11 might have to die to ultimately end this once and for all. And it's kind of been part of my theory for why all along I thought 11 might be the final and ultimate sacrifice of this show. So, the manner in which it came about wasn't necessarily predictable, but maybe the end result of her having to sacrifice herself would be predictable. Do I think it's 100% going to happen right now? No, it is definitely leaning that way. But, there's a chance for the Duffer Brothers to subvert our expectations here and kill off another character instead of 11. Obviously, it's being, we're being guided in the direction and down the path that, 11 it might have to go here. She's going to do a lot of great work to hopefully take down the evil and, separate us from this whole thing, but she might have to stay there, as 8 indicates. Expanding a little more on 8, I have maybe been a little underwhelmed with her usage. I just thought taking that big swing, bringing her back into the fold, she might have a little more to do. Not that I want her eating up a lot of screen time, so I guess, you got to kind of pick your poison here. I know I'd probably be complaining if she was eating up a lot of screen time and had a super prominent role because I want the attention to go to my favorite main characters. But at the same time, I just feel like she's almost done nothing except tell 11, basically, you have to die. And it's like, so they brought her back to give us a little bit of what's going on in that underground lab, and basically that they want to keep these experiments alive, as Dr. Brenner had envisioned all the way back. Dr. K is basically just the new case of things. They have more impregnated women with her/Henry's blood going into them. Okay, so she provided us with those details, and then since then, all she's been doing is basically telling 11, you're going to have to die. Sorry, sister. It's like, okay, I don't know. Is this like a very pivotal usage of a character here? Like, I don't know if she needed to come back just for this. We'll see how she helps in the final fight. I think she's on the good side, but it is a little weird that she keeps just like telling 11, like, this can't end unless we just stay there and die. It's like, I guess, I don't know. So I was hopeful for how they would include 8. I'm not sure I've loved that so far. That's probably one of my only like negatives that I'm pointing out from this second volume here. I thought that, like I said, a lot of great emotional moments, a lot of just really cool /scary /awesome high stakes moments, especially with Will's powers at times, with some of the escaping or some of just like the action scenes of characters frantically running around. Dustin trying to relay the information up to Nancy and Jonathan, obviously unsuccessfully. Oh, it's just so much happening with the escape as well from Holly and Max. I thought Holly was much improved this volume. I loved her in these stretch of episodes, and I thought the acting was better. I know it's still the same actor doing similar stuff, but it just hit more for me. Maybe I've just gotten more accustomed to the actor and the character, but I did like Holly a lot more here. There's also the discussion still of what questions are left unanswered. What do I still desire, I guess, from this final episode? Of course, as I've said all along, and it's inevitable, there needs to be a big ultimate battle. Of course, that's what it's gearing up toward. We saw them preparing, getting their war supplies ready, all headed into the Upside Down, almost all. I think Erica and Mr. Clark, who, by the way, I loved him being re-included in things and finally putting his big brain to usage for the crew and enlightening him and others like Vicky and finally Mrs. Wheeler on what's going on in the Upside Down. So I thought all that was great, actually, bringing some of these side characters into the loop a little more, and especially having Mr. Clark help. But back on topic, most of them went into the Upside Down. The next step is obviously the battle, to bridge, to kind of fight against the bridging of the worlds that Vecna is planning on imposing on the world. And so that's what's coming. What do I still need? I still maybe need a little more explanation on just certain factors related to Vecna's plans, Vecna/Henry's plan with these kids. Why 12? still like what specifically is all going on with that. I mean, I don't know that we're going to get that at this point because it seems like he's taking control of them and the plan is ramping up. So I don't know if there's any more time for explanation with that, but I wouldn't mind a little more. I still, at least not yet. I know that it is now November 6th, so maybe this question will be answered through the events of the fight and wrapping that up. But I still don't think we've been told, why this date is super important. I know it is important, but why it's important once again, and maybe why Will went missing that night still is kind of like a fundamental question. But yeah, those are a couple of the questions I have. I do feel like I have a decent grasp on, the concept of, that place up there that he has and how it's kind of like a funnel, which is the wormhole down to the real world. And, back in season 4 when they did damage to him, he just goes up there and kind of hides until he's ready to inflict damage upon the world and keep carrying back with his plan again. So I get kind of the connectivity between things and how they didn't exactly have the right view of the Upside Down. It wasn't just necessarily a carbon copy of their world, essentially. It's much more to it than that. I still need a rewatch or two to fully digest it, to be honest with you, and understand exactly the consequences of what Nancy did, shooting that and what, did that really have any effect? Like the electric or whatever that was. I don't even think it's electricity, whatever. That big pulse that went across the town and went into the wall, and then there was that hole where, stuff was being sucked into it, and Hopper 8 and 11 had to, kind of find their way back to the right side up. Was there really any consequence of that all happening? I just don't really get what that necessarily was, but I feel like I understand the way that once they all got back and were drawing things on the whiteboard, I understood, the kind of optics and the mechanics of the Upside Down, its relation to this zone that Henry is in, which I don't know if that's considered Dimension X. So we'll just call it Dimension X for the purpose of this. Dimension X, the wormhole, and then down to the right side up. And within that wormhole is the Upside Down. I think I'm understanding that correctly. And Hawkins Lab is the center of it all. It's also Hawkins Lab is basically directly below where his nest thingy is up in that Dimension X. So there's a lot to digest for sure. I think I'm pretty happy with a lot of the Upside Down up into that, where Vecna is now. A lot of the otherworldly stuff, I think a lot of explanation has come from that. Still maybe want a little more specific to the plan and to what originally happened and why it happened. Not sure if we'll get a full expansion into that, though. At this point, there's only one episode left. Also, one other big matzo ball that's hanging out here that I kind of have to touch on, and I'll make a full video about probably tomorrow, is that Byler is officially over. It is not going to happen. If you're a fan who was wishing for that, I'm sorry, if that's not what you were hoping for. Personally, I always said that I wanted what, in my opinion, made the most sense for the story to happen. I don't necessarily, at this point, I can honestly kind of agree that Mike and 11 aren't the strongest couple in the show. They're not the second strongest. They're probably not the third strongest. They have, declined, and I've honestly been disappointed that they haven't had more really good moments together this season, or even had much screen time together at all. They've had a couple hugs and a short conversation in episode 1, and that was it. But that being said, I don't think Mike ever showed feelings for Will. I just don't think he did. I know there are these inspectors breaking down every little look on Mike's face throughout the years, and everything that might have been showing him, suppressing his own homosexuality. Apparently, I never saw it that way. I saw them as genuine reactions, and him, trying to balance growing up with a friend who maybe isn't growing up the same way as him, but he didn't know. Maybe it was because he was, not into girls. So, I can see some of the things that people pointed out to Will being, to Will and Mike, kind of getting together. But ultimately, I never thought it was going to happen. I almost got convinced at some points by Byler fans, but to me, it was a lot of cherry-picking information. This does bring Will's character to a satisfying arc, emotionally, personally. He has found his power and he's found his power and just become grounded in who he is and being confident in that and not being scared. That's one of the biggest dreams in life, not having those fears that hold you back. And by kind of coming out to the whole group. I thought he would come out to Mike individually, but he came out to the whole group, and now everybody that he knows and loves essentially just let him know, like, we're here for you. We're comfortable with you. We're always going to be here for you. This doesn't change anything. And so I think that was really powerful in that way. He literally is and kind of has powers now. And so I just think Will's arc has progressed greatly, and I honestly think based on the trajectory of the characters, it does just make me think that of the, supernaturally capable main characters, that 11 is much more likely to die than Will at this point. And once again, that's been my prediction all along. So nothing has made me waver from that fact. In fact, how satisfactory, Will, how far he's come in realizing himself here in, all the episodes of season 5. I'm honestly feel like it would be crazy to kill him off right after he grows like this and finds himself and breaks out of his shell that he's had to hide in for so long. I think that would not work well to kill him here. So I think Will is safer than I thought going into volume 2. 11 is obviously in more danger even than I could have ever imagined, unless they really pull a quick one on us here and sweep the rug out from our feet and put it back under 11's, and she ultimately doesn't die. It's obviously being indicated that that's going to be a key component in ending the show. Maybe they can subvert expectations, though. Maybe they can bring us one more wow factor, but I hope it's not like, wow, she survives and just nobody at all dies. That would be not good enough to me. But all right, guys, this was my first reaction. There's obviously a lot more that I probably could have dove into, but this video is pretty long as it is, so I'm going to wrap it up for now. And yeah, guys, I just love this show so much. Obviously, was waiting for so long. Finally have volumes 1 and 2 now. 7 of the 8 episodes. 1 episode in this entire series left to finish. And I'm going to be doing it in theaters 6 days from now. It's going to be spectacular. I just can't wait. Can't believe it's almost over, though. And I'm just going to try to embrace it while I'm there. Enjoy every single minute of that thing. And I hope you guys have enjoyed so far, too. Let me know your first reactions and thoughts below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. I'm going to be trying to churn out so many videos about, more particular things I want to break down, reviews, diving into some scenes, all that type of stuff, guys. So stay tuned for that. But I appreciate you following along with me. Hope you guys are loving it as much as I am. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.